What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video I'm going to be going through my top 60 fantasy football redraft rankings. So I've already gone through all my positional rankings: running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks, and tight ends. We're combining those all together here to form my top 60, pretty much like my first 5 rounds of rankings. So not going to be going super in-depth on every single player. You guys can watch the positional videos if you want the in-depth analysis on each guy. More specifically, just looking at trends, how I'm kind of grouping these positions together. And let's just dive right into it. Starting off in tier 1, this is my, pretty clear top 8 at this point. It's going to be Christian McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Breece Hall, Jamar Chase, Bijan Robinson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and then Justin Jefferson. So I feel like my top 4 is pretty locked in at this point with CMC, Lamb, Hill, and Hall. I think CMC, in my opinion, he should be the 101. It just gives you such a high ceiling at the running back position. You have Lamb and Hill, both coming off of 23 plus point per game seasons. And then Breece Hall was 20 points per game, once he was cleared for a full workload. Much better offense with a better O-line, massive quarterback upgrade. I think he could compete with CMC for that insane ceiling. And then looking at the next 4, Jamar Chase, Bijan Robinson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson. Depending on your league, I'd be willing to go Bijan over Chase if you think the running backs are just going to get, scooped up super early on. So I think those two are very close together. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown, Justin Jefferson, I do have them pretty firmly behind, the rest of these 6, but I also think they should be pretty firmly ahead of the, wide receivers and running backs going in the next tier. For Jefferson, we have the J.J. McCarthy injury. I honestly don't think it's that big of a hit. I guess you're losing the unknown upside of JJ McCarthy just coming in and being really, really good. But I feel like the odds of him coming in and just completely smashing in year 1 probably weren't great. I think Sam Darnold's probably the more overall reliable guy because I don't think they're going to try to lessen the load on him, really ease him into the offense. So I think Darnold will be fine for Jefferson. He still has the same quarterback questions, but I'm not really docking him for the JJ McCarthy injury. Then looking at tier 2, only 4 guys here: Garrett Wilson, A.J. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs, Puka Nacua. I'm not a huge fan of the 1-2 turn, but if I was drafting in this late first round area, these are 4 of the guys that I'd be looking at here from pick 9 through 12. I think all these wide receivers, maybe they don't have the nuclear upside of the top 5 or 6, going ahead of them here. But I think they're fine options. Garrett Wilson getting a huge jump in quarterback. A.J. Brown's been a 17 plus point per game guy, hasn't quite hit that 18 to 20 area, but that could be in the range of outcomes. I dropped Jahmyr Gibbs a couple spots just due to the injury he's dealing with. It could end up being nothing, but at this point, just a little bit of risk. I dropped him a couple of spots. And then Puka, also a little bit banged up, but I think he should also be fine for week 1 of the season. Now, I think outside of those top 12, this is, in my opinion, where things start to get a little bit messy here. So starting off in tier 3, I'm going to go with some running backs early on: Devon Achane, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Kyren Williams. I think the second and third rounds are very, very flat. Across the board, there's a lot of variance. There's not a ton of consensus from platform to platform, from one fantasy player to another, from one analyst to another. It's kind of all over the place, so the prices are going to be wonky. But I just think that the running back fall off from this early to mid round 2 area is very, very steep compared to the wide receiver fall off. For me, looking at some of these wide receivers I have towards the end of this tier: Marvin Harrison Jr., Drake London, Chris Olave, Devontae Adams, Nico Collins. I mean, Nico Collins alone in this tier is someone that you could be getting to slip into the mid-third round area. You can get guys like Cooper Kupp, Jalen Waddle in the mid to late third round area, and so I would much rather draft them late third instead of drafting a Drake London or a Chris Olave in the early second, as opposed to passing on these running backs and then having to draft a guy like Jonathan Taylor. I'd much rather get one of these running backs and then get a Cooper Kupp or a Jalen Waddle, even a DJ Moore, a Brandon Ayuk, someone like that in the mid to late third round. I think Achane is going to stick out as being pretty high here. He is my running back 5. I know some people really dislike it, went kind of in depth on him in the running back video. I just think he has the much higher ceiling, compared to all these other running backs. He was the running back 5 in points per game as a rookie. That was with him, not playing early on in the season for 1 game and then leaving 1 game injured. In his healthy games, he was over 20 PPR points per game. The efficiency is insane. The touchdown upside's going to be there, and I've never heard so many people so concerned about a 32-year-old running back as people are concerned with Raheem Mostert here. I'm not even saying Raheem Mostert is like a bad pick, but Raheem Mostert scored like 21 touchdowns last year. Devon Achane still was the running back 5 in points per game. He's a young, super talented player. I'm taking the swing on the upside. If I'm going to be drafting in 5 to 10 leagues, which I will be, I'm probably not going to be drafting Devon Achane at the 201 because I know I'm going to be able to get him in a few different leagues in like the mid to late second, maybe even the early third. But if I'm drafting one single team, you're telling me like I have the 12 pick, like my pick at the 201 is probably going to be Devon Achane if my top 12 are off the board. So that's tier 3. Then shifting into tier 4, start off with 2 running backs here with Isaiah Pacheco and Travis Etienne. These are guys that I'm fine taking like back end of round 2. I think we start to see a fall off at the running back position after these 2 guys. And then we have some wide receivers here. Cooper Kupp, Jalen Waddle, Deebo Samuel, Malik Nabers, DJ Moore, Brandon Ayuk, and Mike Evans. I think a lot of these guys are going to be drafted later than where I have them ranked, just because you're going to get like your Josh Allens, your Jalen Hurts. Those guys are going to go 2-3 turn. You're going to get Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta going in the same area. I'm not as high on those guys as others are, so I prefer to draft these wide receivers, but you can even get them at a more extreme discount. And then I also just don't think there's like a massive fall off with these wide receivers from the guys in tier 3, kind of like I mentioned, and why I'm prioritizing running backs in like the early second round area. And I also don't hate the idea of drafting like Pacheco, Etienne over some of these tier 3 wide receivers, especially if you do think, the running back position is just going to absolutely fall off. Because I think looking at some of these dudes like Olave, Adams, Nico Collins, like what is their legit upside? Is their ceiling that much higher or even comparable to a guy like Pacheco who could be, the workhorse in a Chiefs offense, Etienne, who could pair his efficiency from his first season in 2022 with his workload from last year. So I'm fine if you want to draft those running backs earlier on. Now, shifting into tier 5, we're going to start off this tier with Derrick Henry, and I know a lot of people are going to think this is too low. It's kind of just where I'm at this point. He comes with a lot of risk, and I don't think he carries a lot of upside. He's 30 years old, has the second most touches amongst active running backs. I'm confident he'll be efficient, on this Ravens team with the threat of Lamar's legs. He'll probably have solid touchdown numbers, but he just doesn't catch enough passes, and I don't think the Ravens want him to be this insane workhorse that he's been in Tennessee, where he's getting 20 to 24 carries a game. I think one year where he was pacing for 24 points per game, he was up at an unsustainable 27. The Ravens are not going to feed him like that. They don't need to. They're going to make the playoffs. They're going to want him to be somewhat fresh. They don't need him limping into the playoffs. So I think the workload is not going to be as extreme as we've seen in previous years. The receiving work has never been there, and so I just don't think the efficiency and touchdowns are going to overcome that. Plus, you just have to factor in all the wear and tear he's had. He's a risky pick, and like I said, I think the ceiling is fairly low. Then we have some wide receivers here, Tank Dell, DK Metcalf, Stephon Diggs. I think all guys who should be solid wide receiver 2s. Tank Dell probably sticks out as the guy I'm very high on. I'm very in on him, even though he wasn't in the 2 wide receiver sets in the first preseason game. He's the guy that scored the touchdown. He's very talented. I just want pieces of this Texans offense. And then this is where we are starting to get into the quarterbacks and the tight ends. So I have Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, and then I have 4 straight tight ends with Travis Kelce, Sam Laporta, Trey McBride, and Mark Andrews. For me, the reason why I'm a little bit lower on Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, positionally, I think I'm pretty in line with consensus, QB1, QB2, but the fact that I have them more as back end, round 3 picks as compared to 2-3 turn just comes down to the depth of the quarterback position. In my opinion, there are going to be better values at quarterback than drafting one of these dudes at the 2-3 turn. You can get a Lamar Jackson in the 4th round. You can get an Anthony Richardson in the 5th. If you're asking me, do I want 2-3 turn Josh Allen or mid-5th round Anthony Richardson, I'm taking Richardson all day. You can get Kyler Murray going in the 7th, the 8th round. Even if you punt those elite quarterback options, you have rookies like Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, who I think have pretty high ceilings, heading into their first NFL season. So this year, the quarterback position is just not a spot where I want to reach. If these guys are going to fall, they're going to slip in terms of their ADP, I'll happily snag a high upside guy, but I'm certainly not going to force it just based on the embarrassment of riches we do have here at the quarterback position. And then the 4 tight ends. This is another spot where these guys are very close together. I mean, they're back to back to back to back in my rankings. On certain platforms, you're going to see Kelsey Laporta 2-3 turn. You're going to see Andrews McBride go like mid to late 4th. They might even slip into the 5th round sometimes. In my opinion, that is insane. When you look at all these dudes' 2023 production, when they were healthy and starting, they were all averaging between 14 and 15 PPR points per game. Kelsey was the tight end one last year at 14.6. Laporta was, I think, the tight end 2 or 3 at 14.1 points per game. Trey McBride, once he took over as the starter, was 15 PPR points per game. Mark Andrews, without the game where he left after like a few snaps getting injured to end his regular season, he was in that 14 to 15 point per game area. The separation we see between these guys, in my opinion, makes no sense. So I'm going to be way more aggressive targeting McBride and Andrews at like a 1 to 2 round discount, as opposed to reaching up to draft a Travis Kelce or a Sam Laporta. And I also think we're in this weird spot where typically we're seeing a tight end go in the first couple of rounds. It's been, Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews has been up there, obviously a guy like Rob Gronkowski. But I think we're in this unique spot where the ceiling of these guys are all kind of sketchy, where Travis Kelce has shown it, but he's coming off a somewhat down year for his standards. He's getting up there in age. You have these younger options, Laporta, McBride. What is their max upside? And then Mark Andrews hasn't been a super high upside guy after having a monster 2021. So I think they fall into an interesting spot, but that's how I'm looking at those tight ends this year. Then shifting into tier 6, I have 3 straight running backs. It's going to be James Cook, Josh Jacobs, and Joe Mixon. And I'm honestly coming around on all 3 of these dudes for fantasy. I think based on your specific league settings, your platform, I really don't hate the idea of considering these guys up in tier 5, drafting them in the early 4th round. I'm cool with it. I'm probably personally not going to do it a ton, but I don't think it'd be insane to draft those guys there. I've been very out on Josh Jacobs, but I've started to come around a little bit because a part of my concern for Josh Jacobs was that LaFleur always likes to run a running back by committee. We saw it when he was the offensive coordinator in Tennessee. He had Derrick Henry in a split with Deion Lewis. We saw it in his time with the Packers, a solid split with Aaron Jones, even though Aaron Jones was the clear top back. And so I was kind of expecting, and still am a little bit, expecting a split here with Josh Jacobs, but Marshawn Lloyd is someone who I thought could really be pushing Jacobs for opportunities. Marshawn Lloyd is kind of on this track, though, of the rookie who just can't stay healthy and kind of struggles to work his way into the offense. He, I think, is dealing with a hamstring injury now. He was banged up before that, so not great. And if he's not the guy pushing for opportunities, Jacobs is just straight up better than A.J. Dillon, who I'm not super high on. So I do think there's a real shot he has a larger workload than I was originally anticipating. For James Cook here, I feel like he can pay off at this price without getting goal line work. But if he somehow can filter in on the goal line, he has a very, very high ceiling, should be very involved as a pass catcher, and should play a very solid role in this Bills offense. And then Joe Mixon, I don't think he's the safest guy. I don't think he has an insane amount of upside, but he's going to handle a solid workload on a very good Texans offense, and I definitely think he has the upside to be a back-end running back one play. Then we have Devonta Smith thrown in here, probably a little bit lower on Devonta Smith than consensus, and it kind of just comes down to what I think his ceiling is. Unless A.J. Brown goes down, he could still end up being a high-end wide receiver 2, but it's tough to see him finishing better than the 15 PPR point per game area. And when I'm on the clock and I'm having to choose between a guy like Devonta Smith or some of the tight ends ranked ahead, where you could make a case that all 4 of those dudes could finish in the 15 PPR point per game area, I would rather have that positional advantage at the tight end spot. So Devonta Smith, a very safe pick. He's a solid wide receiver 2, a great wide receiver 3, but not someone who I'm going to try to break the bank on. Would much rather take a shot on an upside tight end play. Then back-to-back quarterbacks here with Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. I'm cool with both of those dudes in the 4th round. Just once again, not trying to reach on quarterbacks, letting the value fall to me. But if they're slipping into the mid to late 4th, very happy to draft them there. Then we have some wide receivers here. We have T. Higgins, Amari Cooper, Zay Flowers, also Michael Pittman thrown in there. Just guys who I think are, fine, high-end wide receiver 3s. You're hoping they have the upside to be fringe wide receiver 1 options. And then wrapping up this tier with Anthony Richardson, I do think, even though he's a little bit more unproven than all the other quarterbacks ranked ahead of him, I think he has very similar upside to Josh Allen. Jalen Hurts, you're getting at a discount because he is unproven, but I do think he belongs in the same tier, as a guy like Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. The rushing upside is just going to be there. He just needs to give you something as a passer to be like a legit high upside quarterback for fantasy. And then pivoting into tier 7, the final tier here, we're going to start off with 2 tight ends, Dalton Kincaid, Kyle Pitts. And I think most people have a decent amount of separation between Dalton Kincaid and Kyle Pitts. Personally, I don't. I think these guys actually both have very similar ceilings to the top 4 tight ends. They're just a little bit less proven, right? Kincaid, tight end 14 points per game last year. Pitts has been underwhelming for fantasy, but this is the same guy who had over 1,000 receiving yards as a rookie. The talent is there. He just needs the situation. He has the situation with Kirk Cousins. So I think you can make the argument that Pitts is actually more proven than Dalton Kincaid. Kincaid definitely has more upside because he's the potential number 1 target for Josh Allen, but I do think they belong in the same area, and I do think they could compete with those top 4 in terms of their upside. Then I have Rachaad White. I know some people aren't going to like this. Some are willing to take Rachaad White in the 3rd round. I am certainly not. Maybe he retains the usage he had last year, but it's just a tough thing to kind of pitch to me when you have a new offensive coordinator, which means they may not want to use a workhorse running back like Rachaad White. He was so unbelievably bad on the ground last year that he just gives me no confidence that he should hold on to his role. Because if I'm looking at this logically, right? Rachaad White was the workhorse last year. I think he's a very solid pass catcher as a running back, but he was objectively a very, very bad runner. If I'm an offensive coordinator, if I am a coach, why am I going to force feed the dude who was wildly inefficient on the ground, even if you don't have another great option? Like your running back 2 is Bucky Irving. Wouldn't you rather have 2 guys who are somewhat fresh rushing the ball compared to one dude who is just bad but taking all the carries? Like logically, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So is it possible they just hand over the workhorse role again? Yes. But if I'm struggling to see the logic in doing that, then it's tough for me to pay up and spend like a round 3 or round 4 pick on Rachaad White. I do think there's, some saving grace here just based on the fact that he is younger, he has that receiving upside, and the competition is very weak. But he's kind of just a player where I'm fine letting someone else take the gamble on him, just not super interested. Would rather get my running backs in the first, 2 early 3rd round area or outside the dead zone. So that's kind of where I'm at with Rachaad White. Then some solid mid-tier wide receiver 3s, George Pickens, Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, Chris Godwin, and then wrapping up this tier with Kenneth Walker and Alvin Kamara. Kamara is also someone I'm starting to move him down even more. It just feels like a really, really gross spot to be drafting Alvin Kamara. His efficiency has absolutely tanked. He's not going to be a guy who's super involved in the red zone. And maybe he pays off like he did last year by just racking up a ton of empty reception volume. But that's not really something I want to bank on here. It seems like they could go with someone else in the red zone. You have Kendre Miller. I know he kind of seems like he's in the doghouse. I don't know. Kamara just hasn't been good enough over the last couple of seasons to make me think he's going to be this team's workhorse, which is why I'm going to be a little bit lower on him. But that is going to wrap it up for my top 60 through 5 rounds of ADP. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts. I'm sure there's going to be some difference of opinion here, but would love to hear your guys' arguments. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.